I'm Lauren, 32 years old, and I'm from a small town in Ohio. Last week, I think I might have humiliated my husband Ryan in front of his friends without meaning to. Or maybe I meant to. I don't know. Honestly, I was just being real. But it's like people can't handle honesty anymore, you know? Ryan and I have been married for 3 years, and he's a great guy. Steady, dependable. A kind of a classic nice guy, you know the type. He's 37 and works as a financial advisor, so he's really good with money, which is good because, well, let's just say I've never been great at managing that part of my life. He swooped in and saved me in every way, really. Before I met him, I was drowning in debt, living in a crummy apartment, trying to make it as a hairstylist while raising my son, Caleb. He's 10 now, and honestly, Ryan has been more of a dad to him than his biological father ever was. But anyway, last Saturday, Ryan and I went to dinner with his friends like a couple's night thing. I usually hate these events because his friends' wives are all these perfect little Stepford types, always put together, always talking about their kids' ballet recitals or how they're renovating their kitchens. I can't relate to them. I grew up different, you know? They probably think I'm trashy, but whatever. Ryan doesn't care. Or at least I thought he didn't. So we're at this steakhouse and everyone's laughing, drinking wine, talking about vacations. One of the wives, I think her name is Jessica, asks me, "Lauren, how do you and Ryan make it work so well? You seem so happy." I could feel their eyes on me, and for some reason I felt this pressure to say something funny or clever. I laughed and said, "Well, it's easy when you marry your safety net." The words just slipped out and I didn't think anything of it. I even thought they'd laugh, but instead there was this weird pause. Ryan's face froze for a second, and then he forced a little chuckle like he was trying to play it off. Jessica and the other wives gave each other these looks, that smug, silent communication women do when they're judging you but don't want to be obvious about it. The guys laughed awkwardly, and one of Ryan's friends, Brandon, muttered something like, "Well, honesty's the best policy." His wife, Anna, actually laughed, and I could feel her trying to suppress it. That laugh was worse than if she had said something mean. Felt like she was mocking me, like I was the joke. At the time, I didn't think I said anything wrong. Ryan is my safety net. What's wrong with admitting that? He saved me from a crappy life, and I'm grateful. But apparently, saying it out loud makes me some kind of monster. And it's not like I married him just for that. I love him. I do. He's sweet, he's stable, and he's great with Caleb. But I'm not going to lie. His financial stability was a big factor. Is that so bad? I thought it was practical. After dinner, the mood was weird. Ryan was quiet on the drive home, which is unusual for him. He's not one to sulk, but I could tell something was eating at him. When I asked what was wrong, he just shook his head and said, "Nothing." That's when I knew it wasn't nothing. The next morning, he barely looked at me. He was busying himself with stuff around the house, fixing a squeaky cabinet, organizing the garage, just avoiding me, really. Finally, I snapped and asked him outright, "Are you mad about something? Was it what I said at dinner?" He looked at me, and for the first time since I've known him, he looked disappointed. Not angry, not upset, just disappointed. "Do you really see me that way?" he asked. "As just a safety net?" His tone caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting him to take it so seriously. I tried to laugh it off, but he didn't laugh with me. He just stared at me, waiting for an answer. So I said, "Ryan, come on, you know I didn't mean it like that." I was joking, but was I? Maybe it started as a joke, but now that he brought it up, I realized there was some truth to it. I started explaining how grateful I am for everything he's done for me and Caleb, how I feel safe with him. But the more I talked, the more I could see his face falling, like every word I said just made it worse. "Do you love me for me?" he finally asked. "Or for what I provide?" That question stopped me cold because I didn't know how to answer. I love him, but is that enough? Isn't part of loving someone appreciating what they can give you, how they make your life better? I didn't think I was wrong to feel that way, but clearly he did. Ryan didn't bring it up again after that morning. But things were tense. I could feel it in the way he didn't look at me the same, didn't hold me the same. I tried to make it up to him, to show him how much I cared. Cooked his favorite meals. Pasta carbonara one night, grilled salmon the next. I even offered to help clean the garage, even though I hate doing stuff like that. But no matter what I did, there was this wall between us now, like he was seeing me differently. I kept replaying his question in my head. Do you love me or for what I provide? I hated that he even asked because it felt like he was trying to catch me, like he wanted me to say something wrong so he could be mad at me. But that wasn't fair. I do love him. He's kind, he's patient, and he's been there for me when no one else was. Isn't that love? Why does it matter what else comes with it? Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to prove it to him. So a few days later, when Caleb was at a friend's house, I sat Ryan down after dinner. I put on my softest voice, my most apologetic face, and said, "Can we talk? I feel like you're upset with me, and I really hate this tension between us." He nodded, but his expression stayed guarded. "I'm listening." I started pouring my heart out, or at least what I thought he wanted to hear. "Ryan, I love you. I mean that. You've been the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'm sorry if what I said at dinner hurt you. I was just nervous, trying to make conversation, and it came out wrong. You know me, I'm impulsive. I don't always think before I speak. But I swear I didn't mean anything by it." He sighed like he wanted to believe me but couldn't quite get there. "Hey," he said slowly. "But I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." "Of course," I said, leaning in, trying to look as sincere as possible. "Why don't you want to have another child?" That question hit me like a punch in the gut. I wasn't expecting it. I froze. "What?" I asked, stalling. "You've always said you don't want another baby," he went on, his tone calm but firm. "But you had Caleb with someone who left you." I stepped up. "I've been a father to him. Why wouldn't you want to have a child with me?" My heart started pounding. I didn't know how to answer without making things worse. Truth is, I never wanted to be a mom in the first place. Caleb was an accident, a product of bad decisions and bad timing. I love him, of course, but being a single mom was hard. And now, with Ryan providing everything we need, the last thing I want is to go back to sleepless nights and dirty diapers. I like my life the way it is now, comfortable, stable, easy. But I couldn't say that, could I? "I just think Caleb is enough," I said instead. "We have a good balance right now. Another baby would complicate things, don't you think?" His eyes narrowed like he could see right through me. "That's not really an answer, Lauren. It sounds like an excuse." I bristled. "What do you want me to say, Ryan? That I'm scared? That I don't think I can handle it? 'Cause that's the truth. I've already been through it once, and it was hell. I don't want to do it again." He stared at me for a long moment before shaking his head. "But you were willing to do it with someone who didn't even stick around. And now, when you're with someone who actually loves you, who's been there for you, you won't even consider it. Do you understand how that looks? Why are you making this about you?" I snapped, my frustration boiling over. "This isn't about you, Ryan. This is about me and what I can handle. I'm sorry if that doesn't fit your perfect little idea of what a wife should be." I regretted the words as soon as they left my mouth, but I couldn't take them back. Ryan stood up and started clearing the table, his movements stiff and deliberate. "I think we're done here," he said quietly. "No, we're not," I insisted, following him into the kitchen. "Ryan, don't shut me out. I'm trying here, okay? I'm trying to make this right." "Are you?" he asked, turning to face me. His voice wasn't angry, but it wasn't soft either. "Because it feels like you're just trying to avoid the real issues. You keep saying you love me, but every time I ask you something important, you dodge the question. If you don't want to have another child, fine. But at least be honest about why. Don't sugarcoat it to make yourself look better." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. I just stood there, staring at him, my mind racing for a way to salvage this conversation. But nothing came. Let me know when you're ready to have a real conversation, he said finally, walking past me and heading upstairs. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after that, feeling both angry and hurt. Why couldn't he just let it go? Why did he have to keep digging into things that didn't matter? I loved him. Wasn't that enough? That evening, as I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, I couldn't shake the uneasy silence between Ryan and me. He was in the kitchen, finishing the dishes, and every clink of a plate felt like another reminder that things weren't okay. I needed to do something, anything, to fix this. He was slipping away, and I couldn't let that happen. That's when it hit me. If words weren't enough, I'd show him. Actions speak louder, right? I'd planned something special to remind him how much I cared. A grand gesture, something romantic and thoughtful that would blow him away. I opened my favorite shopping app and started scrolling. Jewelry, fancy watches, tickets to a concert he mentioned months ago. I was adding everything to my cart. Then I thought bigger. Why not book a weekend getaway? Somewhere fancy, somewhere we could reconnect. It'd be perfect. Sure, it cost a bit, but Ryan always said money was meant to be enjoyed, and this was for us. I found a resort that looked amazing. Ocean views, a spa, the works. I booked the room and added a couple's massage. Then I went back to my cart and checked out the rest of the gifts. A designer wallet, some luxury cologne, and a set of noise-canceling headphones he'd been eyeing. It was expensive, sure, but it'd all be worth it once he saw how much I cared. Not 10 minutes later, Ryan walked into the living room, his phone in hand. His expression wasn't angry, but it wasn't happy either. It was that tired, annoyed look he'd been giving me lately, the one that made me feel small and defensive. "What's wrong?" I asked, playing dumb. He held up his phone. "Did you just spend $3,200? My stomach sank. I forgot he got notifications for purchases on our shared account. "It's a surprise," I said quickly. "For you. For us." He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Lauren, we just had a conversation about priorities, and now you're blowing thousands of dollars on what? A surprise." I crossed my arms, instantly on the defensive. "It's not just a surprise, it's an investment in our relationship. I booked us a weekend getaway, and I got you a few things I thought you'd love. I'm trying to make things right, Ryan." His laugh was short and humorless. "With my money." That stung. "Our money," I corrected, though it came out weaker than I intended. "We're married, Ryan. What's yours is mine." He dropped his phone on the coffee table and sat down, rubbing his temples. "Lauren, do you even hear yourself? You think spending thousands of dollars on gifts is going to fix this? Do you think that's what I want?" "Yes," I blurted, frustrated. "You've been so cold and distant since dinner. I'm trying to show you that I love you. I thought you'd appreciate the effort." He looked up at me, and the exhaustion in his eyes made me feel about 2 inches tall. "Effort," he repeated. "Lauren, effort would have been sitting down with me and actually talking about what's been bothering me. Effort would have been listening instead of throwing money at the problem and hoping it goes away. This isn't about gifts or vacations, this is about us. And every time I try to get to the root of it, you deflect or spend money." "I'm not deflecting," I shot back, though even I wasn't convinced. "I'm trying. I don't know what you want from me, Ryan. I want you to stop treating me like an ATM," he said bluntly. "I want to feel like your husband, not your paycheck. Do you even understand how that feels?" "That's not fair," I said, my voice cracking. "You knew who I was when you married me. You knew I wasn't good with money, but you married me anyway. And now you're holding it against me." "I'm not holding it against you," he said quietly. "I'm asking you to grow up." That hit harder than I expected. My face burned and my eyes welled up, but I refused to let him see me cry. "Wow," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "So now I'm immature. Great. Good to know what you really think of me." He sighed again, leaning back against the couch. "Lauren, this isn't about maturity. It's about respect. I feel like I'm the only one who's putting any thought into our future. I'm the one saving, planning, worrying, and you're spending thousands of dollars without even talking to me about it. How am I supposed to feel? I didn't have an answer. I wanted to yell, to scream that he was being unreasonable, that he was blowing this way out of proportion. But deep down, I knew he had a point. I just couldn't admit it. Not out loud. Instead, I stood up and said, "Fine. I'll cancel the trip. Turn the gifts. Happy." He didn't say anything, which only made me angrier. "You're impossible," I snapped, storming upstairs. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I felt the weight of everything pressing down on me. Ryan didn't understand. He didn't see how hard I was trying. All he saw were my mistakes, my flaws. And maybe I wasn't perfect. Far from it. But wasn't marriage supposed to be about loving someone despite all that? Why couldn't he just let me be who I was? The morning after our last fight, I woke up to an empty bed. Ryan was already downstairs, which wasn't unusual. He was an early riser. But something about the silence in the house felt heavier than usual. I padded down the stairs, still in my pajamas, and found him sitting at the dining table, his laptop open, his phone next to his coffee cup. He barely glanced up when I entered the room. "Good morning," I said, trying to sound casual, like everything was fine. It wasn't, and we both knew it. "Morning," he said without looking at me. I poured myself a cup of coffee and hovered near the table, waiting for him to say something. Anything. But he didn't. He just kept typing, his focus locked on the screen. It was like I wasn't even there. "Are we still not talking?" I asked finally, breaking the silence. "I'm busy," he replied, his tone flat. I wanted to scream. I hated how distant he'd become, how cold. This wasn't the Ryan I married, the Ryan who used to kiss my forehead every morning, who used to make me feel like I was the most important person in his world. But instead of confronting him again, I sipped my coffee and walked back upstairs, telling myself he'd come around eventually. Later that afternoon, I was scrolling through my phone, trying to distract myself from the tension, when a notification popped up from Caleb's school app. It was a reminder about an upcoming parent-teacher conference, and my stomach twisted. Caleb's biological dad, Adam, hadn't been in the picture for years, but every once in a while, his name would pop up in my head, uninvited. Like now. I knew I shouldn't, but I opened my email and searched for his name. It was there. A thread of old, unanswered messages from him. He'd reached out a few times over the years, asking about Caleb, offering vague apologies for disappearing. I never responded. But lately, with everything going wrong between me and Ryan, I've been thinking about Adam more than I should. A few weeks ago, in a moment of weakness, I'd replied to one of his emails. Nothing major, just a short note letting him know Caleb was doing fine. But that one email turned into a conversation. Adam told me he'd cleaned up his act, gotten a steady job, and wanted to contribute financially to Caleb's life. He said he regretted how things ended between us and wanted to make amends. I hadn't told Ryan about any of this. I knew he wouldn't take it well, especially considering how much he'd done for Caleb over the years. Ryan had been the one who stepped up, who played the role of father without hesitation. But part of me felt justified in keeping it to myself. Adam was Caleb's biological dad after all, and maybe having him back in the picture wouldn't be such a bad thing. Still, I couldn't shake the guilt. Every time Adam's name popped up on my phone, I'd glance over my shoulder, half expecting Ryan to catch me. But he never did. He was too preoccupied with his own thoughts to notice. That evening, Ryan came home from work earlier than usual. He walked straight past me without a word and headed upstairs. I assumed he was still mad about the spending, so I didn't press him. But about an hour later, as I was loading the dishwasher, he came back downstairs, holding my phone in his hand. "What's this?" he asked, his voice calm but icy. I froze. "What's what?" He held up my phone, the screen lit up with an email notification from Adam. My heart sank. I hadn't even realized I left my phone upstairs. "Who's Adam?" he asked, though I could tell he already knew. I hesitated, scrambling for an explanation. "He's Caleb's dad." I've been in touch with him recently. Ryan's jaw tightened. Why? He reached out, I said defensively. He said he wants to help out financially. I didn't think it was a big deal. Not a big deal? Ryan repeated, his voice rising. You've been talking to the man who abandoned you and your son behind my back, and you don't think that's a big deal? I opened my mouth to respond, but he cut me off. Did you ask him for money? What? I said, taken aback. No, of course not. Then what are these? He scrolled through the emails and held the phone out to me. There they were, messages from Adam where he offered to send money, and my replies thanking him and giving him details about Caleb's needs. My face burned as I realized how bad it looked. I didn't ask, I said weakly. He offered. Ryan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Offered, he repeated. You thought that would take the pressure off me? I crossed my arms. Well, yeah. I thought it might help. Ryan ran a hand down his face, looking more exhausted than angry now. Lauren, I've never once complained about taking care of Caleb. Not once. You know why? 'Cause I love him. He's my son in every way that matters. And now you're going behind my back, bringing this guy into our lives? What? So you can feel less guilty about him not being around? That's not fair, I snapped. You don't understand what it's like, raising a kid on your own, feeling like a failure because the person who helped you create them walked away. I didn't do this to hurt you, Ryan. I was just trying to... To what? Fix things, he interrupted. Because all you've done is make everything worse. I stood there, stunned, as he shook his head and walked out of the room. A few minutes later, I heard the door slam. He didn't come home that night.